to order. Mr. Holt, would you please call the roll?
Ms. Knoll.
Here.
Ms. Knoll represents the Stonehouse District. Mr. Rose.
Here.
Mr. Rose represents the Roberts District. Ms. Leverins.
Here.
Ms. Leverins is an at-large member. Mr. Polster.
Here.
Mr. Polster represents the Jamestown District. Mr. O'Connor.
Here.
Mr. O'Connor is an at-large member. Mr. Kropf.
Here.
Mr. Kropf represents the Powhatan District and is this year's vice chair. Mr. Haldeman.
Here.
Mr. Haldeman represents the Berkeley District and is this year's chair. I'm Paul Holt, Director of Community Development and Planning for the county, and sitting to my left is Mr. Max Halavin, our Deputy County Attorney. Mr. Chairman, we have a quorum.
Thank you. On behalf of the Planning Commission, I'd like to welcome Ms. Knoll to the Planning Commission. You have a great background. We're looking forward to working with you.
I'm looking forward to it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We now have time for public comments. This is for topics not subject to a public hearing, and that would include the Shaping Our Shores presentation later on. So if you want to speak to that subject, now's the time to do it. Speakers are limited to 3 minutes. Do we have any? I don't have any speaker cards, but if anybody would like to speak, please step forward. Seeing none, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Consent agenda items are determined to be non-controversial. I'm sorry, I skipped one. I beg your pardon. Reports of the commission. Ms. Evans.
First, okay, this is different from what you have before you because Mr. Haldeman started and I finished cutting this pretty dramatically so I don't put you all to sleep. The Policy Committee met at 4:00 p.m. on February 13th, 2020. Mr. Tom Leininger presented for Stage 3 committee consideration proposed amendments to address Code of Virginia changes regarding wireless communication facilities. Changes to the Virginia State Code as well as Federal Communication Commission regulations have made it necessary for the county to update the ordinance to be consistent with these changes. The new text better aligns the ordinance language with state code. Mr. Halavin asked the committee to consider adding language to the motion to incorporate another change in the state code that is pending Senate approval. The committee recommended approval of the proposed ordinance changes as amended, pending House Bills 554's consideration in the Senate. Staff will check in with the Board of Supervisors on this revision before it comes to the Planning Commission. Ms. Terry Costello introduced the fiscal year 2021 to 2025 Capital Improvements Program review process. 28 applications were submitted, totaling almost $155 million. 2 more meetings will be held with representatives of the departments proposing these projects. In public comment, Mr. Jay Everson noted flat enrollment on the school's Future Think projections and asked the committee not to recommend any classroom expansion in the school system. Policy Committee met again at 4:00 on February 20th, 2020, the first of 2 meetings to review the committee's questions with CIP applications. Ms. Laura Messer of the Office of Economic Development addressed questions regarding utility improvements at Ambler's House. Ms. Messer said this is the last project phase needed to enable the facility to begin meeting the recommendations in the Shaping Our Shores Master Plan. Mr. Alistair Perkinson, Parks Administrator, said that no location has yet been found for the proposed Lower County Park, although negotiations are expected to begin soon for sites on Powhatan Trail. Ms. Tammy Rosario noted that having the resources available would facilitate the property acquisition. Mr. Perkinson said that the $500 per square foot estimate for restroom and concession facilities on multiple projects is based on actual costs of the Jamestown Beach restroom and concession building. He said that the size of the proposed restrooms at the War Hill Sports Complex is smaller than those on the other side of the complex, and a certain number of restrooms are required. Ms. Tony Small of the Stormwater Division said that the budgeted funds for stormwater improvements do not necessarily include state and federal funding, but the county pursues grant funding on an annual basis. Regarding the reported mercury impairment in Diaskin Creek, she said that the water quality was tested in 2010 and 2012, and mercury was found in fish tissue noted as source unknown. A watershed study for Diaskin Creek has never been done and is proposed for this 5-year CIP cycle. Ms. Betsy Fowler, the Williamsburg Library Director, discussed the proposal for building a 3rd library in James City County or expanding or building a new library at the current City of Williamsburg site. She said that adequate parking and access are significant issues at the current site. She said that it would be more cost-effective for the county to have 2 buildings rather than 3. The county would continue to share costs with the city if the downtown location were rebuilt or expanded. Ms. Fowler said the proposed natural playground at the Croker Library would be a phase 2 to the recently completed renovation of the children's area inside the library. Significant private funding was raised for that renovation, and the Friends of the Library will also seek private funds for the playground. Mr. Paul Holt addressed the transportation match proposal. He said that the $12 million 5-year CIP proposal is primarily to fund the Pocahontas Trail Corridor Plan. He said that VDOT will not start any work until a project is shown as fully funded. Mr. Holt also discussed site preparation for the Stonehouse School site. The developer has proffered to deliver a school-ready pad site on what was formerly a fill site. The budget of $125,000 is for the county to provide independent technical verification during and at the completion of the project. Policy Committee met again at 4 o'clock on February 27th, 2020. Ms. Grace Boone, Director of General Services, said that a site for the Grove Convenience Center has been found near Fire Station 2. Rick Hale, Capital Projects Coordinator for General Services, said that the turnarounds on Jolly Pond Road at the dam have not yet been designed because access has only recently been granted by the property owner. Proposals will be sought for both T-turn and circular termini. Mr. Marcellus Snipes and Ms. Renee Ewing from Williamsburg James City County Schools addressed the proposed school projects. Ms. Ewing said that the school systems enrollment program, FutureThink, looks at historical issuance of building permits, not planned development. Mr. Snipes said that there currently are 5 Bright Beginnings locations. Bright Beginnings also takes in special needs children and is required to reserve space for them. He said the program has had a wait list of about 100 children every year since its inception in 1976. In response to a question about why high school expansions are proposed but not elementary school expansions, Mr. Snipes said that elementary schools are subject to a certain recommended optimal size, but there are no such restrictions on high schools. He said that the 2 elementary schools with enrollments less than 700 have been studied but cannot be expanded. He agreed to meet on March 5th to finalize its CIP rankings. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions of Ms. Levin? Mr. Polster.
The Development Review Committee met at 4 p.m. on the 19th of February, 2020. The committee members present were Jack Haldeman and Frank Polster. Staff members present were Jose Rivera, Senior Planner, John Rissinger, Community Development Assistant, Jose Morgado, Stormwater, and applicants Ms. Carla Brittle and Mr. Alexander Perkinson from the James City County Parks and Recreation Department. Case number C19-0100, Shaping Our Shores Update. The Shaping Our Shores Master Plan for Chickahominy Riverfront Park, Jamestown Beach Event Park, and the Jamestown Marina have been updated and will be considered for adoption by the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors. Before consideration by the full Planning Commission, the Parks and Recreation Department staff had requested that this item be placed on the Development Review Committee agenda to discuss the update and obtain input from DRC members. No action by the DRC was required. Ms. Brittle presented an overview of the updated Shaping Our Shores using an updated master plan maps for Chickahominy Riverfront Park, Jamestown Beach Event Park, and the Jamestown Marina, and at the same time answering questions. There was some discussion on the future impact of sea level rise on sections of the Chickahominy Riverfront Park and Jamestown Beach, which would be revisited at the project design timeframe. There also was an update on the first phase of dredging and bulkhead replacement for the Jamestown Marina. Commissioners were supportive of the updated master plan and complimentary of the 2-year effort, the level of coordination across the county staff agencies, and their extensive outreach efforts within the community. And as you know, this is one of our items on our agenda this evening.
Thank you. Any questions of Mr. Polster?
If he's leaving.
I'd like to pause for a second to read a couple of very well-deserved resolutions. Mr. Schmidt, would you come forward, please, and bring your family. Everybody come on up. guys. Hi. This is a resolution of appreciation to Mr. Danny Schmidt. Whereas Mr. Danny Schmidt has served the citizens of James City County as a member of its Planning Commission from February 2016 to January 2020, and whereas Mr. Schmidt has served on both the Policy Committee and the Development Review Committee, and whereas Mr. Schmidt served as Vice Chairman of the 2018 Planning Commission, and whereas during Mr. Schmidt's service, the Planning Commission reviewed substantive updates to the zoning ordinance and subdivision ordinance and considered numerous legislative development cases, and whereas Mr. Schmidt is a graduate of the Virginia Tech Certified Planning Commissioner Program. Now therefore be it resolved that the Planning Commission of James City County, Virginia does hereby extend its sincere appreciation to Mr. Danny Schmidt. And be it further resolved that the Planning Commission wishes to express its gratitude to Mr. Danny Schmidt for his time of dedicated service to the citizens of James City County.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I know you have a meeting to attend to. Just a couple brief words here. Thank you, Jack. I want to thank each and every one of you that I served with on the Planning Commission for the past 4 years. As in addition, the planning staff. It's been an honor. It's been a wonderful experience that I hope to carry forward in our county and abroad. Just I can't tell you, as hopefully we've got a large cable TV audience right now. I can't tell you as citizens of this county how important it is if you can find that time to give back to your county, to, you know, whether it be a few years, 4 years, 1 year, to a commission or a board or volunteering in any which way you can, because it improves us all as a whole. And in particular, you know, with sort of the hyper-partisan things that we deal with each and every day, this has truly been an apolitical experience. And I want you to know that the citizens of this county are in good hands going forward with this crew you have on the Planning Commission. And this is a good time to have a good crew because they are in the midst of the comprehensive plan. And we need your feedback on that plan. So thank you, James City County. It's been an honor.
I have another resolution of appreciation for Ms. Odessa Dowdy. I'm really sorry that she couldn't be here tonight. I hope she's listening on television. Whereas Ms. Odessa Dowdy has served the citizens of James City County as a member of the Planning Commission from February 2019 through January 2020, and whereas Ms. Dowdy has served on the Development Review Committee, and whereas Ms. Dowdy has served on the Planning Commission Working Group for the 2040 Comprehensive Plan Update, and whereas during Ms. Dowdy's service, the Planning Commission reviewed substantive updates to the zoning ordinance and considered numerous legislative development cases. Now therefore be it resolved that the Planning Commission of James City County, Virginia does hereby extend its sincere appreciation to Ms. Odessa Dowdy, and be it further resolved that the Planning Commission wishes to express its gratitude to Ms. Odessa Dowdy for her time of dedicated service to the citizens of James City County. I got to know Odessa pretty well in the past year. She's raising a family and carrying a job just as Mr. Schmidt does. It's a tall order, but she did it very well, and she's going to be missed. Thank you. We'll move ahead to moving ahead to the consent agenda. Consent agenda items are determined to be, oh, excuse me, I forgot Mr. Polster. No, we got him, okay. I'm sorry, I'm discombobulated here. These are items determined to be non-controversial. However, a planning commissioner can pull any item for discussion. There are 3 items for consideration. the minutes for the February 5th, 2020 regular meeting, and the two resolutions of appreciation that I just read. Would anybody like to pull an item?
Move approval of the consent agenda.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye. Thank you. We'll move ahead to the public hearings. The first up is AFD-19-0003, Barn Swamp AFD Edition, 811 and 917 Stewarts Road. Mr. Weissong, good evening.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good evening to the Commission. Mr. Stephen Bomer has applied to enroll 44.74 acres of land located at 811 and 917 Stewarts Road into the Barn Swamp AFD. The subject parcels are currently undeveloped and forested and are located within 1 mile of the core of this district. The parcels are zoned agricultural, are located outside of the primary service area, and are designated for rural lands within the adopted comprehensive plan land use map. Staff finds this proposal compatible with state code, the comprehensive plan, the zoning ordinance, and surrounding development. At its January 23rd meeting, the AFD Advisory Committee recommended unanimous approval of this application. Accordingly, staff recommends approval subject to the proposed conditions. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have, and Mr. Bomer's here tonight as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions of Mr. Weissong? None? Any disclosures? No? Thank you. We'll open the public hearing. The applicant might like to make a presentation or anything, or? Okay, thank you. Any questions of the applicant? Thank you. No speaker cards? We'll close the public hearing. Discussion or a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve JCC AFD 19-0003.
Holt, please call the roll.
Ms. Leverins.
Aye.
Mr. Polster.
Aye.
Mr. O'Connor.
Aye.
Mr. Rose.
Aye.
Ms. Snoll.
Aye.
Mr. Kropp. And Mr. Haldeman.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries.
Thank you. Number two on public hearings, SUP-19-0012, Tiki Tree and Landscape. Mr. Meadows.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the Commission. Hayden's Place LLC, doing business as Tiki Tree and Landscape, has applied to allow a contractor storage yard at 6283, 6293, and 6289 Centerville Road. The parcels are zoned A1 General Agricultural, and a contractor storage yard is a specially permitted use on property zoned A1. The parcels are located within the primary service area. In addition, only the parcel at 6283 will be used for the storage area. The parcel belonging to Mr. Timothy Soderholm and Ms. Ashley Marie Campbell will be used for an office and restroom facilities, while the parcel belonging to Mr. Bruce Gilliam will contain an access easement to the storage yard from Centerville Road. Staff recommends conditions which are intended to mitigate the impacts of the use and preserve the residential character of the neighborhood. Such conditions include screening from adjoining parcels and from Centerville Road, limiting vehicle access to Centerville Road, and requiring a revegetation plan. Staff considers the proposal compatible with the 2035 comprehensive plan as a use of very limited commercial nature and being located on a collector or arterial road. With the proposed condition, staff finds the proposed use compatible with surrounding zoning and development. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission recommend approval of this application subject to the conditions included in tonight's packet. At this time, I would be happy to answer any questions you may have, and I believe the representatives for the applicant are also available. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions of Mr. Meadows?
Good evening, Mr. Meadows. I just wanted to get a little background information as to how we got to this point with this particular application. I saw on the chart that lists the impacts and potentially unfavorable conditions, a note that says the project, in several of those categories, the project has already been built to commercial use without approval from the county. Could you give us a little background on how it has gotten to this point, and did the county work with the applicant previously to try to bring it in compliance with ordinances and so on and so forth?
Yes. So previously on parcel 3, the applicant had tried to have a similar use, storage yard, and was found in violation. And since then, that was in 2017, 2018, he got rid of all of the equipment, so that violation was abated. And since then, it has built upon parcel number 1. And then now that's in violation. So there is a series of Board of Zoning Appeals, and rather than continue to go through that process, my understanding is the applicant is now trying to go through the SUP process. So that's what has brought us to this point.
So there have been, over the last 3 or 4 years, since, because I do remember the name of this company coming before the Planning Commission in a prior case, and so there have been at least 2 efforts by the applicant to set up a commercial operation on one of the parcels, and without going through county approval. Once that was discovered, the applicant was told to move it, to get rid of it on parcel 3, I think you said, and then he took it back to parcel 1. Is that, and then, is that fairly short version of what happened with this?
Yes, I believe so, yes.
Okay. And then just sort of a hypothetical question. In the event that the Planning Commission or ultimately the Board of Supervisors does not approve this SUP request, what are the next steps as far as the applicant's business, the property, and so on?
The applicant can go back and continue the appeal process through the Board of Zoning Appeals to the Circuit Court. They may go back, appeal the Board of Supervisors' decision to the Circuit Court, or they can come into compliance by removing all contractors, materials, equipment, trailers, et cetera, essentially getting rid of the commercial use.
Thanks, Mr. Meadows.
Other questions?
Excuse me, I didn't see anything about how the neighbors around this thing felt. Have you had any comments from them?
I received one comment when, just before the case was deferred back in February. And it was more just it was one of the adjoining neighbors. They were sort of concerned what the situation might be. They were going to keep track of it. I think they had some concerns about where the fencing might go, but I have not heard back from that neighbor.
Other questions?
Good evening, Mr. Meadows. How are you today? Just wanted to ask real quick, both of the parcel 1 and 2 have residences on them. Will they be used as residences, or I'm just trying to understand if the SUP allows, especially on parcel 1. I understand parcel 2 is just for the access easement, but parcel 1, we're talking about a contractor storage yard. So is the residence a permitted use as part of that?
So the storage yard area will be limited to sort of this middle part of the parcel. I do not believe that precludes residential use in this front building. I'm not sure if there's currently residents in that. That would be a question for the applicant.
Thanks. And then just on the draft conditions, it, when I forget which number it is, sorry. Talks about the fence shall only have a 6-foot opening,
I believe that's,
which is 5D, so it's on the
Okay.
second page. Sorry, it took me a minute to find it. But so the submitted master plan shows a 16-foot gate with the fence. So are we sure that we're approving 6 feet wide versus 16 foot?
yes, on the master plan, that's an existing gate. The conditions call for screening to be on parcel 1, and that's will be part of the site plan process, which is also subsequent to approval. And that will have the limiting gate of 6 feet.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Just the clarification on parcel 1, you made the statement that the storage area was it was limited just to that one area there. How about the area but behind?
Farther back on
Yeah.
the parcel, that is also not within the SUP application, and so if in the future, that would have to be an SUP amendment or some other process.
So the fencing, does it extend all along that property line of parcel 1?
That will be, I guess, once the site plan comes in, it'll be determined how well that fencing is covered, but as it stands, they will not need to go all the way around the parcel, just to screen the commercial aspect. So I guess if there's parts of the commercial area that are not screened, that's where it would go.
Does a homeowner to the left of parcel 1 understand that?
I'm not sure. We have not gotten any, as far as I know, we've not gotten any.
So, I'm sorry, so on the limits of, on the draft conditions on limitations, it talks about, activities associated with the project, so that's just the limited space. And then it talks about, shall be conducted on parcel 1, parcel 2 shall be used for access, parcel 3 used for activities with a home occupation. So when we say no mulching, stump grinding, or anything along those lines, does that cover all 3 parcels, or is it just the small part that's defined as the project?
My understanding is that would cover, as far as commercial use for those things, all 3 parts. If they're, I guess if there are residential uses, and I'm not sure off the top of my head, if there are residential, ordinance would cover stockpiling for the residential area, but that would go back into a compliance with the SUP. So if it was extended beyond that parcel 1, then that would put them in violation of the.
Any other questions? Any disclosures? Seeing none?
Well, I'm sorry, I spoke with Ms. Majors, who's the applicant's attorney, briefly this afternoon.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? Thank you. We'll open the public hearing. The applicant have an application or? Good evening.
I'm Virginia Lee Major. I'm the attorney for Hayden's Place. This is Mr. Ryan Stevenson with AES. This is Mr. Sutterholm, who is the owner of both Tiki Tree Service and Hayden's Place, and I'm sorry, Mr. Michael Hikus, who is attorney for Tiki Tree Service. We are all here to answer any questions that you all may have. I'd like to set the record straight briefly, if I may, and Mr. Sutterholm may come kick me in a minute, but let me try to take this, if I can remember ones at a time. Both of the current residences on the property are occupied. The SUP is limited to the middle of parcel 1. I'm sorry, is that right? And that's where the contractor's yard is to be located with the sheds and whatnot. When Mr. Sutterholm bought the property, he had to clean up the property when he bought it, but that was all he was doing with that. He has, in the past, what he had done is he had sought a supplemental use permit for the parcel that is his home, which is the one that fronts Settlers Landing. Settlers Lane. And he was able to obtain a home office, but unfortunately he was not able to keep the vehicles there. After that, he then bought another parcel out in Croker. He tried to obtain a supplemental use permit for that, unfortunately, for various reasons, and I think a lot of it was because it was on a dirt road and the equipment was heavy, that was denied. He then subsequently bought parcel 1, and yes, he has moved his equipment there. He thought he could use the shed and do all of that. Unfortunately, that was not the case. He needs to seek this supplemental use permit, and he is trying to work with the county to make sure that he can do that. He has tried to go through this process before, and unfortunately, it was unsuccessful. I believe that the main reason that he was unsuccessful on the site where his home is because it was just too small. It lacked an acreage. Now, the fencing question, there's already an 8-foot fence, I believe, along the side of parcel 1 that fronts Settlers Lane. So that's already been done. That's been there. Now, for the questions about the neighbors, and I do apologize, I did not submit this. I wasn't sure we necessarily needed to, but I did make copies, but if one will suffice, this was just something that was circulated, and whomever in the neighborhood could sign it. We have, well, and there's a letter from Ms. Ashley Springer, but we have one, I believe there's 6, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 other neighbors who were in favor of allowing this, and if you all would like to see this, we could pass it around. I do apologize for not including it. And I have copies, but oh, I did not include Ms. Springer's letter. Hold on. I'm not sure. I believe that clarifies most of what was asked of the county at this point, and I believe that Mr. Stevenson can probably answer any other questions that you all might have.
Chairman, can I ask a question?
Yes, I'm sorry.
On the fencing, I've driven down Settlers Lane, and I've been able to peek through parcel 3, and I did see what looked like a wooden fence, about 8 foot. I couldn't tell, though, as I went down Settlers Lane, how far that extended.
Mr. Sutterholm can answer that.
8-foot fence has been extended behind lot number 2, 3, 4, and 5, all the way back to the property corner of parcel 1. So the 8-foot fence does go across the property line of lot number 2 on Settlers Lane. So the 8-foot fence is there on parcel number 3, and it goes behind any fences that any of the lots and stuff on Settlers Lane. Now there is also a 8-foot fence that goes from the pole barn on 6283, which is the SUP, goes from the pole barn all the way up behind the proposed contractor yard to screen to the west as well. The adjacent neighbor had taken down some of my screening bamboo, which that is being replaced and stuff with evergreens as well on the outside of the fence to help with screening from neighbors on the west side. On the east side and stuff, there is a 8-foot fence that goes all the way down.
So from where the pole barn is there anything then that continues up to the end on the west side?
Yes, there's a 8-foot fence from the pole barn towards Centerville Road.
I'm talking about going north from the pole
No,
barn.
it stops at the pole barn as that's the parking area. That's what needs to be screened and stuff. If the county does require for the fence.
I'm just
to,
asking what's there and trying to understand what the fencing is and what you've done to try to mitigate the neighbor's piece. Thank you.
A quick follow-up for Mr. Soderholm. Just to confirm that I'm understanding everything, parcel 3 is your personal residence, correct?
Yes, parcel 3 is my personal home. Parcel 1, there are 2 single-family homes on there.
And so you own the land and just rent the homes to individuals, is that correct?
Sir.
And there have been no issues with your tenants complaining about the construction or the storage or material?
No, sir. The letters that was given to Mr. Holt, those are the surrounding neighbors that or adjacent neighbors and along Settlers Lane and right there at 6277, the 21-acre agricultural land that surrounds half the property. All of them have been in agreeance to how I operate and keep my property clean.
And that is correct. I've spoken with them, and they're in agreement with it.
Are there designs to expand your business?
No, sir. For the past 16 years and stuff, I've been a sole proprietor business where I subcontract my workers as needed. Typically, it's just me and 3 guys, and that's the way I've kept it so far. But I don't plan on expanding with any bigger equipment or anything like that.
Now, I ask because I get concerned sometimes when we start putting limitations on businesses, and right now, the way the conditions are written, it's, you can only have as many cars there as shown on the master plan, which is 3. My concern becomes twofold. 1, a limitation on you, and 2, an enforceability portion from the county, as far as monitoring and putting that together. So I'm assuming you agreed to the draft conditions and the limitations that are in there. So I just, like I said, I get leery when we start handcuffing businesses on numbers and operating hours and the like, so just want to make sure that you're good with it.
Yes, how I would field that question would be, this is a small community of 3 houses, and not only and stuff do I use my equipment, they're dual purpose machines and equipment as far as they maintain my property, as well as we take them off-site to go do other people's trees and to do their landscaping off-site. When the word special is put in special use permit, this is for a very limited storage yard. I'm not storing other people's materials for other jobs at my home. Any materials that are on these parcels are meant for these parcels. I'm not storing other people's property or supplies at my house. The only thing that I store there is my trucks, my personal equipment, and my chainsaws inside my shed. So I'm not looking to bring customers home. I'm just looking to park there. I'm not wishing to bring other people's trees to my house to process them. I'm only wishing to park there.
Any other questions?
But I didn't notice in the letters, thank you for sharing the letters. Was there a letter from anyone at 6273, the parcel just to the, I guess, southwest?
6273?
Yeah, am I reading that correctly? Just the one to the southwest of parcel 1.
Thanks.
They did not wish to sign one. I had 3 people and stuff say that they did not wish to sign one, that they weren't against me. They were only for me going through the right channels. So they weren't for or against. They wanted to stay neutral, and I respected that. They said, I wish you all the best, and, wish you luck as long as you're going through the right channels. So this is us coming into compliance with the James City County.
There was one lady,
You use the mic. so
oh, I'm
people-
sorry. Well, I'm used to being louder. Excuse me. If I may, there was one lady, when we were working with the zoning violation, that she had expressed some concern, and that was exactly what she had said. She said, I just want you to go through the special use process. She said, I don't have any problem with it, you need to do this through the county. And those were her feelings.
Any other questions? Thank you very much. This is an opportunity for members of the public to speak to this subject. I have one speaker card. Mr. John Holland. Good evening. Please state your name and address.
Yes. Mr. Chairman and Planning Commission, I'm John Holland. I reside at 6273 Centerville. I wish to speak against this special use permit at 6283 Centerville Road. The property is in very close proximity to other homes. I'm all for, a property owner to be able to use and own their own property. However, it's one thing to own a business out of your home, but it's another when said businesses cause disruption to a quiet community with its use of trucks, chippers, grinders, and bucket trucks. I can see all of that and hear it daily. There's been, on occasion, when our quality of life has been disrupted due to this equipment noise from the said property. And it's really hard to explain to my 2 toddlers about the noise occurring outside of their bedroom window, when in their world, it's nap time. Our home may not directly join the property in question, but out of all the properties mentioned on this staff report that's written for this, other than the properties owned by the applicant, ours, is the closest to this parking lot in question in parcel 1. It's within 80 feet, because there's a 75-foot variance between that I do have right-of-way to use in the deed to my property there. I find it quite disturbing and irresponsible on behalf of the zoning board that they could, pass something like this to come into the community. I mean, colonial heritage is no more than about 130 yards with a yard finder through us. I mean, so it's a lot of noise going on and it can be heard. Our child's bedroom window is merely, like I said, 80 feet from all of this operating and loud equipment lot beside us. Staff reports mentioned in James Shire settlement the parcel to the west, which is in between us, of the 21 acres of agriculture, even parcels directly across from Centerville, but none of them have mentioned the property which is affected most, which is mine, 6273 Centerville Road. I feel and speak for everyone in the surrounding properties in question, and believe you me, there are more and there will be more April 14th. They just were not allowed, or not able to come tonight. Loud equipment really does not belong in a neighborhood or a community. It belongs in a business park with commercial zoning. I asked the Planning Commission to rethink this recommendation that the zoning board approved for this special SUP. Would you like basically to hear equipment when you walk outside your back door out of your back door and into your which was once a quiet backyard? Or would you like to come out of your back door and see, because my property there, 6273, it's higher than that property. The parcel in between mine and the red actually divots in, so I can see everything above it. Unless you build a 12-foot or a 20-foot interstate wall, you're not going to block anything. And blocking is one thing, but sound is another. And the sound is the disruption, even on the weekends. Grinders going. There's a neighbor behind me that gets woke up, in the mornings with this grinding going on. So I'm not sure really what's going on, but I beg and plead of you guys not to pass this and let this come to our surroundings. Thank you. Do you have any questions for me or no?
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak to this subject? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Discussion or a motion?
I'd like to follow up on, normally we're not allowed to exchange dialogue during the public comment period, but I wanted to clarify something. The attorney for the applicant said that this is a storage yard only for contractors' equipment. The neighbor who just spoke is indicating that he's hearing grinders in operation and things like that. I just want to know, is this a storage yard or is this processing some of the materials from the job sites? Come on up to the microphone, please.
Thanks for raising that question. I wanted to kind of respond to it. I represent the business. there is no business being conducted on those parcels. No tree work is being done, and I wanted to emphasize and clarify this. No tree work's being done, no stump grinding, none of it. What this, and the planner has set this out in a very comprehensive summary. All that's happening here is subcontractors meet my client at the yard in the morning. They drop off their trucks, they take the 2 bucket trucks that are referenced in this report and the pickup truck, and they go to on site to do their tree work. They're not doing tree work on any of these parcels. Sometimes they leave the bucket trucks, and they also have a dump truck, on the site while a job is ongoing. So they're not even returning them to the yard at night. They come back in somebody's pickup truck. The subcontractors get in their pickup trucks and go home. So what we have are vehicles coming in the morning. They pick up the equipment and trucks they need. They leave for the day. They come back at the end of the day and store the vehicles there, intend to store the vehicles there overnight until they go next morning. So I don't cast aspersions on anyone, but there is no commercial activity going on site. And to even call this commercial storage yard is a little bit misleading, because the only thing being stored there is vehicles. During the day, those vehicles are the subcontractors' pickup trucks or whatever vehicles they got to the property in. At night, over the weekend, are sometimes the 2 bucket trucks, the dump truck, and the pickup truck that are all referenced in the planner's summary. So again, there is not commercial activity ongoing. There's not commercial activity contemplated for this property. The only thing we are asking for permission to do are to store those vehicles which are used off-site during the day, there at the property during the night. And with the conditions that the planner has proposed and that my client has agreed to, we think that's a reasonable use that will not infringe on neighbors' rights or neighbors' enjoyment of their property.
And I have one follow-up question to your comment. All equipment requires maintenance of some sort. Is it conceivable that the chippers and grinders and so on have periodic maintenance, blade sharpening, whatever is involved in that, and they run the equipment to make sure the maintenance was properly done?
I suppose that that's at least conceivable. It seems to me that, again, that's to the extent that an activity that would be really on fairly infrequent occasions, and also during normal business hours. I would note, too, if you look just down the street, I mean, you're talking about the character of this area, there's 2 properties over. My client tells me it's about 1,100 feet. There's an auto body shop and an auto repair shop as well.
Pro's Garage, I think, is that
right.
the one? Yeah.
Yes, sir.
There is a chipper as part of the equipment? What I'm trying to figure out is what the noise is that the neighbor is hearing.
Asking, is there a chipper in use on the property?
I do have a chipper and I do have a grinder and stuff as part of my machinery. The noise that my neighbor has attested to was, I've only owned the property for less than 2 years. And when I got this piece of property and stuff, it was beyond disrepair. So there has been maintenance that has been done on the property to bring it up to living standards. I do have 2 single mothers with children that live on the property and the 2 residences that's on the property. And I have to make sure that there's no hanging limbs and everything that are over the driveway. And the previous owner of the property and stuff had this overgrown. There was lots of bamboo, lots of dead limbs, lots of trees and stuff that had been broken during windstorms. The way that this all came about and stuff was because 2 big trees had uprooted and they were hanging over the pole barn. They had already put limbs through the roof of the pole barn. The gentleman and stuff that had just spoken stuff called the county and stuff because I was taking down my own tree, that a windstorm had damaged these trees and we're about to damage the pole barn and stuff beyond repair. So some of the noise that he has heard over the past 2 years, less than 2 years since I acquired it in April 2018, has been me doing 12 years worth of maintenance that had not been done to this piece of property because there was only one resident in it for the first 5 years that he had acquired his house. So with buying a piece of property, it's always a project and keeping it up and also keeping it presentable for the surrounding neighbors. So what I've done is I have rehabbed the property. Only noise that my neighbors should hear now is just maintenance of the property. I don't bring home other people's projects to my house. Only projects that I'm doing on site are to elevate the quality of life of this parcel.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions?
I'm not sure if I have one of staff or the applicant. If I understand correctly, the reason for the deferral last month was the fact that there wasn't an identified restroom for use on the property. So I'm just trying to understand what the ordinance requires as far as a bathroom for a contractor storage yard. Just because it's requiring that we lump in parcel 3 in part of this to satisfy an SUP on parcel 1, if I understand the movements right.
Yes, the deferral was to figure out a way that parcel 1 could have access to a bathroom. That comment came from building and safety as a need because it is a commercial use. And portalets or other portable facilities are not allowed. So it would either require building on parcel 1 or access to a neighboring parcel, and bringing parcel 3 in allowed that. And there was already a home occupation on parcel 3. That was reasoning for.
So if one of the residences on parcel 1 were to become the office and restroom facility, would then it need a home occupation permit as well, or would it be part of the SUP?
I'll have to get back to you on that.
Okay.
To be a part of the SUP, you wouldn't need a home occupation because the SUP is for the commercial use. It's limited to parcel 1.
Thanks.
Parcel 3 were sold separately. What would that do to the bathroom requirement for parcel 1?
Then parcel 1 would need to have a bathroom put.
But again, I mean, at that point, you know, the requirement would be for the commercial use to have a restroom. So let's say parcel 3 was divested and got sold off, then in order to still be in compliance with the building code, there would have to be a restroom available for the employees on parcel 1 or 2 that were still covered by the, so it would be a relocation of that restroom to still be in compliance.
Any other questions? None, we'll close the public hearing. Discussions? A motion?
Well, just a comment from my standpoint. I probably will reluctantly support this, and I just say reluctantly because I'm concerned that it seems to me that the applicant has been purposely trying to not comply with county regulations in the operation of his business. My guess is that the county went to him several times and told him he was not in compliance. So that bothers me. I'm also concerned about the neighbor. I understand that any property owner, regardless of whether they have a business or not, if they have trees on a property, there's going to be requirements to, for the health of the tree, trim it back, sometimes remove a tree, and so on and so forth. And if I can take the applicant at his word that the work that was done on parcel 1 was only to bring it up to standards, that's understandable. The SUP conditions do provide, state that any expansion of the business in any fashion is going to require an amendment to the SUP, which is another opportunity to come back and revisit this if there's, if the applicant tries to expand his business. But, frankly, I've been a little disappointed that it's been operating in a non-conforming fashion for a couple of years, and now that the applicant's backed into the corner, in a sense that he's now trying to come in compliance. On the other side of the coin, if you look at the time and effort, not only for staff, but for the court system in appealing Board of Zoning Appeals or the Board of Supervisors, if they were to turn it down, and based on the staff report saying that this is in compliance with the comprehensive plan. Like I said, I'll reluctantly support it, but those are some of the issues that I was struggling with, not only when I read the staff report, but also listening to the comments tonight.
Rose?
I'm struggling a bit too, and again, I'm kind of new, so I'm not sure, but I'll weigh in. One of the things that I do notice is that the letters, none of them really come from the immediately surrounding neighbors. Oddly concerning, and going back to your point in terms of the disregard for setting this up properly, it doesn't seem like we necessarily have assurances that there won't be mulching on the property associated with the business, and the claim would be, well, I'm maintaining my property. So I don't know if there could be, or if there's any way to monitor that or get assurances that that won't happen.
I agree with Mr. Rose. I have a neighbor across the street from my house in probably a fairly upscale neighborhood who runs his chipper all weekend. So there's maintenance to be done. He firewood, and he's got a wood splitter, and it just makes a heck of a racket. And it just happens periodically when he decides to go tackle all the brush that's in the back of his yard for lot size. So I do understand that just private ownership entails making a racket sometimes for your neighbors. I'm not comfortable using my position as a planning commissioner to be punitive, but to take this application on its face. I don't really feel that I have a choice whether to trust the applicant or not. That's not my, I will probably.
I've driven by this property for the last year and a half, and I've been pleasantly surprised to see what he's done with parcel 1, that little house that was absolutely dilapidated. And I thought, geez, the county must have stepped in to put that into the rehabilitation program, but they fixed it up, and they've cleaned up the area around it. Because I understand exactly what you were saying about those trees in the back there, and the rest of it, especially that entire area, has had problems with that. So from that point of view, I was really kind of pleased to see that somebody had really cleaned that up to somebody. I was concerned about the same thing about the neighbors, and I noted that parcels 3 and 4, 2 and 4 didn't have a letter in there, but that 3 and 5 did on there. And so the fact that they may have chosen not to write a letter because they thought that they just wanted to go through the process makes complete sense. On the other hand, there are a number of letters coming from people adjacent across the road there too. So those are the people that would have been probably just as well impacted by it. So that was one of my concerns about what was the back and what have they done to mitigate it. And clearly the fencing, and if I understood it correctly in the SUP, There's also greenery that has to take place around that fence. So it's just not a bare fence that's 8 feet. There is going to be some effort made to do some screening, not different from what we do with our corridor studies, right? Where we require. So I'm with you. I'm glad he came in, that we're going to settle this thing up. And I take him at his word that he's going to do what he did. And clearly, he spent a lot of money with the A&E folks to do all that, the stormwater pieces that he has to comply with, and the limitations that are in there, as well as he's got 2 lawyers. And this has been going on for how long? I'm glad you guys are going to get out of that business for it. So anyhow, I will support it.
Anyone else?
I'm really struggling with this. Again, we have another instance where it's a non-compliant use, non-approved use, I guess is the proper word. And I appreciate the fact that the applicant's trying to bring the parcel into compliance. I kind of feel that including parcel 3 by allowing the bathroom to suffice for the restroom facility, parcel 1 is trying to put a square peg into a round hole. You know, and if I look at low-density residential under group 2, which our staff report responds, the recommended uses under group 2 are schools, churches, very limited commercial, and community-oriented facilities. So I don't find this to be a school, church, limited commercial, or a community-oriented facility. And further in the staff report, it talks about if located within a residential community, and I understand it's not necessarily parcel 1's in a residential community, it should serve to complement the residential character of the area rather than alter its nature. And the businesses are generally intended to support the residential area in which they're located. So for those reasons, I don't intend to support this application. Again, I appreciate the efforts to try to bring this into compliance, but I think we've danced around the history of this parcel a little bit tonight, and it's a long history of non-compliance, and I think that just speaks for itself. So I will be voting no on this application.
Ms. Leverett?
I'd like to address a couple of points that Mr. O'Connor made. I do think that this limited commercial operation is supportive of the surrounding community. One of the letters that we just read said that when there's a snowfall, the applicant plows that road. Presumably, in times of hurricanes or whatever, I wouldn't be surprised if the applicant didn't go around with a chainsaw and assist the neighborhood. I just wanted to make note of that.
I plan to support this, however torturous the path to compliance was. It is now in compliance, in my opinion. So that's how I see it. Anyone else? A motion?
Make a motion to approve JCC SUP 19-0012 Tiki Tree and Landscape.
Call the roll, please. Mr. Holt.
Ms. Leverins?
Aye.
Mr. Polster?
Aye.
Mr. O'Connor?
No.
Ms. Knoll?
No.
Mr. Rose?
Aye.
Mr. Krupp? And Mr. Haldeman?
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries.
Thank you. Next public hearing, SUP-20-0001, 2898 Lake Powell Road Tourist Home. Mr. Leininger, good evening.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission. Mr. Frank Berggrand has applied for a special use permit to allow for a short-term rental of an entire 3-bedroom home located at 2898 Lake Powell Road. This use is considered a tourist home because the owner will live off-site during the time of the rentals. The property is zoned R2 General Residential, is designated Low-Density Residential in the comprehensive plan, and is located inside the PSA. This SUP, if granted, would allow for short-term rentals throughout the year. The home is currently occupied by the applicant as a vacation home and would be rented would rent when the owner is no longer there or is out of town. No changes to the footprint to the home are proposed. Staff consider the home's location, parking provisions, and appearance to be favorable factors in the evaluation of this application. Staff is recommending conditions intended to mitigate the impacts of the use and preserve the residential character of the home. Such conditions include restrictions on commercial signage and lighting, and any future expansions of the use would require SUP amendment. Staff finds the proposal to be compatible with the comprehensive plan, zoning ordinance, and surrounding development, and recommends that the Planning Commission recommend approval of this application subject to the proposed conditions. At this time, I'll be happy to answer any questions you have, and the applicant is here as well. Thank you.
Any questions of Mr. Leininger?
One, if I could. It appears to, it's in this picture, to the south on this parcel, that there's no landscape buffer between from the photos, it appeared that to the north there was a fence, and then to the south on the other side of the driveway there was no landscape buffer. So how do we determine from a staff perspective what the proper buffer is? Because we've had several of these where we've talked about screening from the parking area, the driveway, and the like, and I'm not seeing that as a needed mitigation in this, but we've seen that come through on several of these applications. Is there a litmus test for that, or?
So the idea with the tourist homes is that from all external appearances, it would continue to resemble that of a single-family home. I think in the instance where we've had some of that supplemental screening, I'm thinking back to the one we had under consideration last month. I think a distinguishing characteristic there was that it was more internal to an established single-family residential neighborhood. And if you remember that parcel specifically, it was a very small parcel, and it was almost cut in behind another existing parcel and just had a different character and proximity to its neighbors than some of these other ones on relatively larger lots.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Thank you very much. Any disclosures? We'll open the public hearing. The applicant like to make a presentation, or?
I believe Mr. Thomas did a wonderful job describing what we're looking at doing. I reside here as a vacation home.
Have your name and your address, please.
My name is Franklin Berggren. I actually currently reside full-time in Naples, Florida, at 5821 Painted Leaf Lane.
Thank you.
And we utilize this at our vacation home. We've been vacationing over here for the past 10 years. Previously at Powhatan Plantation. We just kind of grown to the area. We like the area, and eventually hope I'm moving here.
Any questions of the applicant? Mr. Kropp?
Yes, sir. Since you're a full-time resident in Naples, Florida, will you have a real estate property managing the house, or checking on it periodically to make sure that the tenants are keeping the property and the structure up? Or how?
Yes, sir. I'm actually hoping myself to come here once or twice a month.
Oh, okay.
Myself to utilize the home myself is my goal. I'm a full-time firefighter paramedic, and in my off days, I typically find time to come up here.
Thank you. We have any speakers cards?
No, sir.
With that, I'll close the public hearing. Discussion? Or a motion?
I guess from discussion perspective, if the county's records are correct, I did go out and look at the last sale of this property, which appeared to be 2018, and the home sold for the price of $95,000. And, just a quick look on Zillow estimates that the sale price of the home is just slightly north of that $95,000. So again, I remain challenged on tourist homes, because we call them tourist homes and they sound really nice, but the reality is they're just transient homes, and we are opening these up to, again, alter the communities that they're going into. And I think that our GSAs and our comp plan really talk about trying to increase the opportunity for affordable housing, and I think 95 grand falls well within our housing opportunity policy as an affordable home. And by allowing this to become an investment property, and I appreciate that the gentleman wants to come and visit, but again, I think what we have done is just we're continuing to remove housing stock that runs counter to our comp plan, so I don't intend to support the application.
Thank you. Any other discussions? A motion?
Move approval of JCC SUP -20-001, 2898 Lake Powell Road Tourist Home.
Thank you. Call the roll, please, Mr. Holt.
Ms. Leverance.
Aye.
Mr. Polster.
Aye.
Mr. O'Connor.
No.
Ms. Knoll.
Aye.
And Mr. Rose.
No.
Mr. Krupp.
Aye.
Mr. Haldeman.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries.
Thank you. The number 4, public hearing, SUP-20-0002, 3374 Ironbound Road Tourist Home. Mr. Wysong, welcome back.
Thank you, and hello again. Ms. Jeanette Brady has applied for a special use permit to allow for the short-term rental of an entire 4-bedroom home as a tourist home to be located at 3374 Ironbound Road. This property is zoned R8 Rural Residential, is designated mixed-use 5 Forks on the comprehensive plan, and is located inside the primary service area. This SUP, if granted, would allow for short-term rentals throughout the year. No changes to the footprint of the home are proposed, and the owner will live off-site. Staff considered the home's location, parking provisions, and appearance to be favorable factors in the evaluation of this application. Staff is recommending conditions to help mitigate some of the impacts of this use. Such conditions include restrictions on commercial signage and lighting, and any further expansion of the use would require an SUP amendment. Staff finds the proposal to be compatible with the comprehensive plan, zoning ordinance, and surrounding development, and recommends that the Planning Commission recommend approval of the application subject to the proposed conditions. At this time, I would be happy to answer any questions that you may have, and Ms. Brady is with us tonight as well. Thank you.
Thanks. Any questions? Ms.
This has
Leverance?
been a single-family home prior to this?
Yes, it was built in 2003, and I believe that's been the use.
A huge garage behind it.
It's quite big.
Does the applicant intend to employ anybody? I know it's a little bit larger than most of our normal tourist homes, so just curious if.
That would be a question best for her.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Any disclosures? We'll open the public hearing. Good evening, welcome.
Hi.
You would be the applicant, I take it.
I am. I'm Jeanette Brady, and I live at 2501 Mannion Drive, but I also own all the property around this house, the airtight self-storage and Oak Tree Office Park. It's a corner that really should be commercial anyway, because it's right in the middle of it. My daughter has lived in it off and on. She travels from Arizona and has a business here. But she's the one who brought it up. She said, Mom, you really should use it for an Airbnb because I'm not here that much. And we can block it off when she needs to be here. But we're there every day, walking the property. So we know what's going on. We have cameras. Believe me, if something's going on that shouldn't be going on, they're going to be in trouble with me. So if you have any other questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Is it a 4-bedroom house or a 5-bedroom house?
It's a 4-bedroom house, but it does have game room up above the garage that's huge. And it also has the 3rd story, which makes it look even more grand and big, is totally just sheetrock, and not sheetrock even, it's just like an attic, a walk-in attic. So it looks bigger from the outside than what it is on the inside.
I'm just curious, in the proposal it says 4-bedroom, but in the letter you wrote it says 5-bedroom.
Well, if you count the game room, you could use it for a bedroom, but that's what it is.
Rented as a 5-bedroom?
Well, I consider it a 4-bedroom, but I mean, it could be used as a 5-bedroom if you wanted to make the game room into a bedroom.
Any other questions of the applicant? Thank you very much. Do we have any speaker cards? Would anybody like to speak to this matter? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Discussion or a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve JCC SUP -20-0002 Ironbound Road Tourist Home.
Thank you very much. Mr. Holt, please call the roll.
Ms. Leverins.
Aye.
Mr. Polster.
Aye.
Mr. O'Connor.
No.
Mr. Rose.
No.
Ms. Knoll.
Aye.
Mr. Krupp.
Aye.
Mr. Haldeman.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries.
Thank you. Planning Commission considerations, C-19-0100, Shaping Our Shores, Mr. Ribeiro.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good evening, Commissioners. On June 9, 2009, the James City County Board of Supervisors endorsed the Shaping Our Shores, or SOS, master plan in order to guide the revitalization and development of 3 James City County waterfront park facilities: Chickahominy Riverfront Park, Jamestown Beach Event Park, and the Jamestown Marina. More than 10 years have passed since its adoption, and now the SOS master plan is being updated. With me is Mrs. Carla Brito of the Parks and Recreation Department. Mrs. Brito is the Recreation Center's administrator, and she has led the effort to update the SOS master plan. This evening, Mrs. Brito will provide a summary of the SOS update process and highlight the changes being proposed for each of the 3 parks. After Mrs. Brito's brief presentation, planning staff and Parks and Rec staff will be happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
As Jose stated, in 2009, James City County created the Shaping Our Shores Master Plan to guide the revitalization of our 3 waterfront parks. And it has been used as a guide for the development of our CIP budgets for the Marina, the Riverfront Park, and the Jamestown Beach Event Park. In addition, the addition of the new amenities and the age of the SOS plan led to the decision to review and update the 2009 approved document. In October 2018, a cross-departmental JCC employee team was created with the task of updating the plan. The team, led by the Department of Parks and Recreation, included members from the Office of Economic Development, Planning, the James City Service Authority, and General Services. 3 parks that comprise the plan have become celebrated treasures to our county residents over the past 10 years. For this reason, the update of the plan was not about having to recreate or fix something that was broken. Instead, the team approached the update to the plan with these goals: to evaluate and confirm where existing park amenities are successfully meeting community needs, to identify unmet needs or opportunities and challenges to improve upon existing amenities, to evaluate maintenance conditions and the longevity of our park features, and to learn from the community if the facilities in the plan are no longer needed, feasible, or should be built in other parks. The team began by reviewing the SOS master plan with a visit to each park site. After those tours, the team agreed that there were some modifications and changes that needed to be done in all 3 park locations. Specifically, decisions needed to be reviewed as they related to water restrictions, grant easements, environmental concerns, resource protection areas, zoning, building codes, and new trends and patron requests. The team met for several months to update the maps, and new amenities and changes since 2009 were added to them. Each map was then reviewed to see if the 2009 proposed amenities were feasible, taking into account environmental, zoning, and code issues. A work session with the James City County Board of Supervisors was held on September 24th, 2019, to review and endorse the draft maps, the public input phase, and the final approval process. Once the James City County Board of Supervisors endorsed the concept maps, the SOS committee solicited public comment and agency input. 2 public meetings were advertised and held at the James City County Recreation Center on November 21st, 2019, and November 25th, 2019, to gather input. A total of 13 citizens and special interest individuals attended these meetings and provided feedback. An online survey was also conducted for a month, and 23 citizens provided written comments on park improvements. Paper survey stations were also set up at the James City County Recreation Center, the James City County Marina, and the Chickahominy Riverfront Park in an attempt to canvass specific park users. The surveys netted an additional 21 comments from citizens, bringing the total of comments received to 57. The plan was also reviewed by VDOT, James City Service Authority, Stormwater Division, the Department of Conservation and Recreation, and NOAA as it relates to the grant easements that they hold. All the solicited comments were collated and reviewed by the SOS committee. Further meetings were held and additional changes were made to the draft maps for each park to reflect the citizen request. The final version of the draft Shaping Our Shores Master Plan update was presented to the James City County Parks and Recreation Advisory Commission on January 15th, 2020. The commission unanimously voted to approve the SOS Master Plan and endorse seeking the James City County Planning Commission approval. On February 19th, the plans were presented to the DRC for comments prior to bringing the plan here for a formal consideration. No questions on the process. Be happy to do a walkthrough of each park and the proposed changes. Starting with Chickahominy Riverfront Park. Since 2009, several facility improvements have been made at the park. These include resurfacing the pool, paving, and improvements to the recreational vehicle loop, replacing the water main, removal of a smaller pool, adding a splash pad, and the addition of a William and Mary boathouse. The general concepts that appeared in the 2009 map were kept in the new version with minimal relocations. In addition to that, the team also recommended the following additions to the map. First, the addition of the proposed JCSA water treatment plant that's denoted in B on the plan. Relocate the long-term RV and boat storage to the front corner of the park. Removal of a second entrance that was shown on the original plan. Addition of camper amenities to include a propane filling station, laundry rooms, environmental education, recreation room, bathhouses, and a relocated pump-out station. And the addition of a second rowing building due to growth of the sport. That comprises the changes for Chickahominy Riverfront Park. Next is the James City County Marina. Since the past plan, the Department of Parks and Recreation assumed daily operations of the marina from a private contractor. The Board of Supervisors leased 10 acres to the Economic Development Authority in September of 2015, and then the EDA leased their parcel to Billsburg Brewery, and a production building and tasting room were constructed. There were some substantial changes to this park map. In particular, some items were removed based on their location in the floodplains and the RPAs. Changes include eliminate the parking peninsula and ramp due to wetlands, removal of condos, hotel, and retail shops. These items were not endorsed by the Board of Supervisors in the first plan, and the size of the property does not support their development now. Relocate the marina office building out of the floodplain. Relocate the dry stack storage out of the floodplain. Add additional short-term trailer parking. Move the long-term boat storage across the street to Jamestown Beach Event Park due to lack of space on this property. The addition of a second entrance into a new parking area. Add a semi-permanent event tent. Relocate the proposed restaurant food service area. And relocate the boat ramp and the fuel dock. The last plan, Jamestown Beach Event Park. Since 2009, several grants have been obtained to make improvements to the beach. We've had the creation of 3 beach areas with the installation of shore grasses. There's been upgrading to the parking in the entranceway. We've created an accessible paved walkway, constructed a restroom building, which included upgrading the water and sewer system. And lastly, a paddlecraft launch site was created. Changes and modifications to this map were severely limited by identified archaeological and historical sites and the restrictive covenants of the 2 grants that were used to purchase the property in 2007. The committee realigns some amenities and recommends the following changes. Relocate the fishing pier off the VDOT property to the far end of the beach. Add additional restrooms and parking for events and beach patrons. Add an event tent for use with the Ambler's House. Realign the park entrance along Jamestown Road to intersect with the road leading to the marina. Close the section of Green Springs Road that runs in front of the park. Align it to meet Jamestown Road. We have the addition of long-term boat storage on this property to support revenue development and storage for the marina. And the addition of a public-private running center to support community racing events and provide workspace for Parks and Recreation staff. I'd be happy to provide any details if you have any questions on any of these proposed changes to the maps.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Thank you. May I have a motion to accept or approve?
Motion to approve, and we'll do a roll call vote.
Approve the shaping of the shores.
And before we do, can I just say that I appreciate Ms. Brittle's presentation. It was very informative, and I see Mr. Carnifax in the audience, and I just wanted to say that his proactive leadership in Parks and Rec is just obvious. Every cycle we have for capital improvement projects, the lion's share of them come from Parks and Rec, and it's obvious that he and his staff are working very hard to make James City County the showplace that it is, and thank you both for your efforts in this regard. And with that, I'd like to make a motion to accept the Shaping Our Shores Master Plan.
Call the roll, please, Mr. Holt.
Ms. Leverins. Aye. Mr. Polster.
Aye.
Mr. O'Connor.
Aye.
Ms. Knoll.
Aye.
Mr. Rose.
Aye.
Mr. Krupp.
Aye.
And Mr. Haldeman.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, just before Mr. Carnifax gets away, I would just like to say that I had the opportunity to meet with Chesterfield's Planning Division and Parks and Rec yesterday, and had a long discussion about James City County, so they were very complimentary of what Mr. Carnifax has done down here along with this team. So just, it's nice to go 55 miles away and hear good things about James City County, so I just wanted to share the recognition and say thanks as well.
Thanks.
5 miles away and still the best.
The Planning Commission and Board of Zoning Appeals 2019 Annual Report. Mr. Holt.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. Another whole year has passed. Traditionally, we do not do an elaborate staff report. Really, the items in your annual report are a compilation of everything that's really happened over this past year. So you shouldn't see anything new. We always like to highlight, there's a very long appendix, all of the goals, strategies, and actions that have been worked on by all the various departments by the county, in the county over the last year to advance those actions, and those items are summarized there. And again, looking at a whole year in hindsight, it's amazing how much work that the commission has gotten done. We've continued the recent tradition of combining this annual report with the annual report of the Board of Zoning Appeals. And other than that, Mr. Chairman, I don't have anything additional, but if you have any other questions.
Any questions? Amazing amount of work done by the commission and the staff, just to round that out. May I please have a motion to approve the 2 annual reports? And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Planning Director's Report.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Holt. Again.
Mr. Chairman, again, members of the commission, so I don't have anything additional to add other than what's been prepared and presented in that director's report. I will call your attention again, sort of another annual tradition that we have. Tonight, you'll be adjourning your meeting to the special meeting in the next couple of weeks, where we'll have our organizational meeting and the public hearing for the capital improvements program. So within the planning director's report, you will note you have a draft calendar for this year and then a placeholder for next year dates. you should find that all of the dates for the Planning Commission meeting, Policy Committee, and DRC follow our current standard template, Planning Commission being generally the first Wednesday of each month, Policy Committee following the first board meeting of the month, and DRC is generally the third meeting of the month. Because we are in a comp plan update year, you've got a fourth column in there where we've dropped in the placeholder dates for the Planning Commission Working Group. Please take an opportunity to review these. If you have any questions, concerns, if any of these seem problematic, please let me know. You're not adopting the calendar tonight, but in 2 weeks, when we at our organizational meeting, you will be adopting it. So we'd want to have any changes incorporated at that point. With that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you. Questions? Seeing none. Under commission discussion, Board of Supervisor coverage, Ms. Leverance, you're all set. Thank you. Anything else? Consideration?
For discussion.
Discussion, yes. Mhm.
I think for this year, I think we've seen at least 6 of Airbnb. And I continue to be conflicted every time we have one. And it has to do with what we have as a policy. And the policy kind of reminds me of our rural policy, in that there's only one piece that's enforceable underneath that policy, and we have nothing that's really enforceable underneath this Airbnb outside of arterial roads is the only thing that comes to mind. But we seem to have conversations every time about the housing stock, the affordable housing, especially with properties that aren't on arterial road areas. We seem to have this conversation, but it seems to always be a concern, and I noticed tonight at least a lot of hesitancy in several voices in terms of supporting this thing. I was one that was reluctant to do that for it. If I recall correctly, is at least maybe 3 or 4 months ago, we talked about the idea of having this as part of the discussion for the comp plan, and a relook then eventually at the zoning. And I've been hesitant to push this thing because that when we've gone and looked at the number of Airbnbs in the county, there are 300 plus, most of them are in the timeshare and hotels is where they are. And so the reason that I'm a little conflicted on that area is that I certainly don't want to get in the way of what is a legitimate business and another way of bringing tourists to this place in that way. So I don't have a way forward, but I know that I'm not comfortable about this and would like to see us at least examine this and have the staff come back maybe with some details on that of what we can do. The other issue that we've run into, again, is the owner and the occupancy for it. And we've talked about tonight again, about the surrounding area and how it's buffered. But the other thing that we ended up with a conversation that really got me started on this thing was what's happened in Arizona and Virginia Beach in terms of some of these properties turning into party places. And the point that Tim has brought up is that when we grant an SUP, it's forever. It continues with the property all the way through. And so there's something in my mind that says that, okay, we don't want it to be in a neighborhood, and we unanimously agreed to that the last time around. But we also don't want these things necessarily to be permanent in some of the areas for it. So one of the new things that I picked up in tonight's piece on the Ironbound Road, which I at first had really no problem with because we've approved 3 in the last year for it. So it's hard to say no to a 4th one. But the lady brought up a point where, in fact, it should be commercial, because it's right in the middle of that. And so I'm not sure whether or not when we take a look at this area and the consideration of it, that we don't look at deciding that it's neighborhood commercial or it's something of that sort that you can then define an ordinance around where that is. Because it is a commercial activity, any way you look at it. So where is it that you want those sorts of activities within the counties for these Airbnbs for? and what restrictions do you want to put on it. So I want to ask the staff or make the proposal, I hope with the agreement for all of you here, that we take this on as part of the comp plan with the notion that we come up with a zoning ordinance at the end of the process, and we give the community a chance to see what they want to say about it. And then we'll go from there. Anyhow, that's my 2 cents.
I think Mr. Polster did a great job of summarizing probably the conflict that all of us have experienced on the tourist home and the rental of rooms. And for myself, I've been concerned about how this is spreading, but I have felt that the ordinances allow it, and this is a tourist community. So it was really a dilemma. But I do think, I think, as I said, Frank summed it up very well, my concerns and my hesitancy sometimes, but I have felt that I've been between a rock and a hard place, and I felt obligated to approve it based on the existing ordinances. But I do think that this would be a worthwhile study to see if we can't maybe better refine and define the whole idea of rental rooms. And the tourist home has one set of criteria and provisions, rental rooms is something else. And so anyway, my compliments. I think you did a great job summarizing that, Frank.
I agree, and I particularly like your comment about getting public input on what does the public want, what do our citizens want as Airbnbs proliferate, not just here but everywhere.
I just would say, I'm sorry.
I came from Charlottesville, and they just went through this a couple of years ago, and it was very interesting. One of the requirements was in a B&B that the owner had to be on the property at all times. And then there were other ones where you rent them out short term. So there are two different issues there. So the lady that owns Airtight, she's there every day. It's her property. She's there. The gentleman has no idea what's going on. He doesn't have a professional property manager. He can come up twice a month, but he still doesn't know what's going on there, and it's in a residential area. So you'll hear from the neighbors for sure. So something needs to be put in place, and I can look back and find out what Charlottesville did, but they did do public input. They went around, and then because they're two different entities, I also owned a boarding house with 10 rooms that I rented, that my business partner and I rented out, and we came under entirely different rules and regulations. I mean, we had to have a manager on there all the time and so forth, but it's really sticky. People say, well, I should be able to rent a room in my house. Yes, you should, but you should be living there, as opposed to, I'm going to rent it for a week from somebody from Virginia Beach, or it gets really sticky, and neighbors get upset. So I think something that needs to be figured out. Because it's a new thing, it's kind of new, the Airbnb and
we did
VRBO.
We did amend these two policies, rental of rooms and tourist homes, 3 or 4 years ago, as I recall. I was on the policy committee, and then, of course, on the planning commission that approved it. And I've learned a lot since then. I would like to take another crack at it too, but I too think the comp plan revision process is the way to go. I hope we have a lot of citizen participation in it.
I wasn't going to say anything until Frank brought it up. So, but just for your all's benefit, so my challenge has been that our goals, strategies, and actions in our current adopted plan, and I expect some of them will carry over into our new comp plan, are really we talk about promoting the tourism industry. We talk about creating jobs within the tourism industry that provide benefits. We talk about affordable housing. We talk about all these things that I think everybody likes to invoke the name tourist home and Airbnb, and they're just monikers for the fact that they're really transient occupancy. And if Airbnb goes away, the transient occupancy gets to stay. So it's not limited to you know, the vehicle of rental being, you know, VRBO or the like. So, so I do get concerned that, you know, people could, you know, it's removing the housing stock in some of these areas that would normally fall and support into the category of our housing opportunity policy. So, you know, for all those reasons, I'm just finding more and more I can't support these applications. So, but I would like to, on a slightly different subject, applaud Mr. Holt and his staff for trying to find a reasonable solution for the Tiki thing, although I didn't support it, and there's quite a long history there. You know, I know you guys were trying, your team was trying to make the best of a bad situation, so, you know, I do appreciate from that perspective that you all were able to try and, you know, or did find, at least for tonight, a solution that made that parcel work and for that community, because you know, I've had lots of people reach out to me at the grocery store and schools and the like who have been unhappy with that situation for a number of years. So, thank you.
Have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
And just a reminder, we're back here on March 16th. That's a Monday. It's our annual organizational meeting in the CIP public hearing, so it's not on our normal.
It's still 6 p.m.
Still 6 p.m. Yes, sir.
Do you have these letters?
For years.
I kept this. Thank you.